Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week. So glad you could join me a day late. Thanks for being here. Despite the fact that we are a day later than normal, usually this is a Friday afternoon thing, but I was flying out to our alternate location in the Woodlands, Texas. So glad to be here. Let's see who we got. So we got Katie Dozier's here over at the other side of the house. We got James Langford, Paul and Mitchell Bernstein. That's PMB. Good to see who that is. Great comments from PMB over the last few Rattlecasts. Good to see you. Paul, D. Coleman is here. We got Dick Westheimer. We got Sharon Ferrante. This is an opportunity for people who usually aren't available on Fridays to join in the critique of the week because it's Saturday. So hopefully we'll see some new faces. JD Middleton, he's here over on Facebook as we get the ball rolling. So today is going to be a lightning round. And what we like to do with that is every once in a while, instead of going through the submissions, if you're here live, send something in. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit. If you're here, send something in. And what we're going to do is use mostly, we'll mostly use the Open Lines email address. So go right now, go to, right here. Why is that not popping up? Oh, you know what? I don't have that. That's right. So let me, it's Open Mic. Email your poem to Open Mic. That's openmic@rattle.com. I forgot that I never sent the slide for the Open Mic show over here. I don't think I have it. But anyway, all you have to do, I'll put this up on screen. Where can I put it? Like this. You won't see me for a second, but we'll do it here. This is the email address to use, Open Lines, or openmic@rattle.com. That's openmic@rattle.com. So if you'd like to share anything, I'll put that in the chat window, chat message things too as well. But if you'd like to include a poem, all you have to do is email a poem to openmic@rattle.com, and then I'll go through as many as I can today, right now, live. Also, if you would like to just say in the chat windows that you submitted a poem recently, and I can, it was passed on, we can talk about why you passed on it if you'd like. Just leave a message in the chat window and say, hey, check out this poem that I sent in, and that'd be good. But so as always, the purpose of the critique is to give the workshop experience to everybody who, it's just such a wonderful thing to be able to sit around and talk about poems and have strangers talk about your work so you know how people are actually receiving it, how the poems are landing. And that's always the purpose here at the Critique of the Week, to share our actual honest opinions about what works and what doesn't for a poem, help authors out as much as we can. And so email your poems in, anything else to do, or any questions that you would like to share as well. Email that once again to OpenMic, that's openmic@rattle.com. We'll see as the submissions come in. We got one from Dick Westheimer. We got one from Lucy Chow so far. Let's see. So, and if you have any questions too, feel free to ask any general questions about poetry or submissions as well. I'm kind of wondering if more people will be able to show up now, and it's an unusual time. It looks like we have less, so there's more room maybe to talk about poems if you'd like, of anything you'd like to talk about. Let's see. There's Cindy Putnam Guntherman is here. Peter Desmond is here as well. Okay, let's jump into some poems. We'll see what we get today. So there's two poems here from Lucy Chow. And Lucy says, my questions about this poem are, I first wrote this as an ekphrastic poem for a photo of a diving kingfisher. How well does it stand on its own without the image? Then I brought it to a workshop and applied this revision technique called reversal to it, where the lines of the poem are flipped and minor changes to punctuation and grammar made so that the language makes sense. Does this process of playing with it help make it better, convey the meaning more engagingly, or open up more lyrical, expressionistic, less linearly logical possibilities? So very interesting submission here first from Lucy Chow. Let me put this in the Word document so we can get a good size on it. It's not a very long poem. But we'll see here. There's two poems here. Oops. Let's do this, and we'll make the font a little bigger too. There. And then unbold. Okay. So here are the two poems by Lucy Chow. The first one is the original, and then the second is a workshop technique, which I've never heard of, reversing the order of the poems, but I like it. Think that's interesting. So here's take a look at Translumination by Lucy Chow. We'll take a look at this one first. Translumination. And Translumination. I wonder if I can. I think I'm going to turn off the spelling little lines too, so you don't have to look at those because we know if there's mistakes. Okay, so it's really not about one of the things that comes up all the time with submissions is people think that typos or things like that really matter, and they really don't. We're looking for poems that are interesting and memorable, and if there's a typo, it's not like it's not like a grade school test or a high school test or something where you're going to lose points for having mistakes. The only typos that actually matter to me are if there's some kind of lack of clarity because of the mistake, then it's harder to figure out what's going on, and that can be an issue. But if it's just like, some typo like there instead of there, I don't care. We'll fix that for you if the poem's great. It doesn't really matter. So anyway, let's take a look at Translumination. This is Lucy Chow once again. The theory of relativity states that speed compresses thickness, and that at the speed of light, everything shrinks to wafer thin. The Halcyon Alcedo, however, contravenes this cosmic principle by stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer of light 3 times as long as its oblong body. A sapphire strobe that scintillates to sear its flaring silhouette into screens of sage-green leaves. A sword-beaked kingfisher suddenly, a swordfish's rippling blade that swishes through the air, a meteor trailing its tail of cobalt flame. Quantum mechanics claims that no object can remain untransformed by the gaze, that every light beam lancing the lens will be transluminated on planes of photosensitive cells as bioluminescent specter, as memorial of a monument of its moment, a feather of no mass or gravity, a flying wave of pure energy, ablaze, alive, free, captured in flagrante, forever freeze-framed. Lapis dives in divine rapture, sublime light, a divining rod. So interesting poem there. As always, Lucy's poems are always so rich with language, and so much is going on, so compact with meaning, and just a lot of images and a lot of language that really hits you strong. It's a very condensed poem, which is why too. Lucy, just in general, I think. The one thing with your poems is to condense them down and get a little shorter, because they're so rich. It's like sometimes the longer poems end up feeling too long just because there's so much lushness there. But it's great at this length, especially. So that was a really interesting poem. And let's read the reversal first too, and we'll see. This is the reversed and revised version, which is really interesting. I like that as a concept of something to do in the revision process. But let's take a look at this, and we'll talk about both ones, which way we like it better. This is Translumination again, but revised and reversed. Lapis dives in divine rapture, sublime light, a divining rod, ablaze, alive, free, captured in flagrante, forever freeze-framed, a feather and no mass or gravity, a flying wave of pure energy, as memorial of a moment, as monument of its momentum. On planes of photosensitive cells as bioluminescent specter, that every light beam lancing the lens will be transluminated, claims that no object can remain untransformed by the gaze, a meteor trailing its tail of cobalt flame. Quantum mechanics is a swordfish's rippling blade that swooshes through the air of sage-green leaves, a sword-beaked kingfisher suddenly scintillating to sear its flaring silhouette into screens of light extending 3 times along its body. A sapphire strobe stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer. The Halcyon Alcedo, however, contravenes this cosmic principle. So that's really interesting. So the poem in general, I felt it's interesting to read this reversal concept, because the first poem, the first version, I felt like the poem kind of drags a little bit and was sort of slow getting into it. But then once we got toward the momentum it felt like the poem really picked up and gained a lot of energy and was working really well toward the end. And I actually like the reversal better because it starts out with that same energy. And it's interesting. It's the lines themselves that are creating the energy, and not the sort of the shape of the poem. So it's actually, you can see how really clearly when you do this, I guess, that the energy of the poem is in the language. It's not in the sort of plot, I guess you could say. So I like it too. Yeah, I like the reversal. And so let's focus on that one, because I think that is the better version. I think it's nice. And Lucy had said, let me pull up Lucy's comment again. Lucy said, see, I wrote this, so it was reversed. How well does it stand on its own without the image? That was the other question I couldn't remember. So, yeah, and so I don't know. I'm a little bit, because I know the image that this is working on. This is that, it's a famous image of a photograph of a kingfisher, where just its beak is sort of diving straight in, and it's like diving into the reflection of itself. And I think that's such it's one of those pictures I think a lot of people have seen, and I think you probably know that that's what it's being written about, if you've seen it. So I think, I don't know. I think it's hard to say if it needs it. I don't think it needs the picture though. I think. But it's hard to say because I do know the picture, I think. Okay. Yeah, so the reversal. Yeah, Sharon Fronte says, I like the reversal. Yeah. Dick says Tim read the reverse more fluently. Yeah, because it started out with the energy, whereas it was trying to sort of find its voice in the beginning of the poem, or the earlier version. So Katie Dodger says, I think it stands great on its own, but I would retitle to give the image A Fish Jumps into Water. Well, that's interesting. So the title is one of the things that we're going to talk about titles on the Poetry Space next week. The title here doesn't really add much. Translumination. It's a word from the poem. We have the transluminated down there, and it's a sort of an abstract type word. It sort of evokes a little bit because it's one of those words, even though you don't hear it, you kind of know what it means because of just the way language works. But it's a very sort of abstract, distant from any kind of image type word, and so. So it just doesn't really add much as a title. So I think a better title is a good thing to do. Lapis dives in divine rapture, sublime light, a divining rod, ablaze, alive, free. This list is really nice. This list that opens up, and that's what gives it that energy too, where the poem just feels a lot more fluid, pulling off here. Captured in flagrante, forever freeze-framed, a feather and no mass or gravity. Do you see how, look at how the difference between the poem is? The other version, the theory of relativity states that speed compresses thickness, and that at the speed of light, everything shrinks to wafer thin. So it's a very abstract. You could even, I would suggest, I was thinking this as I was reading it the first time, cutting this and making it an epigram, because it, you don't need to have a quote. You could just this is some from some random dictionary, and you can just kind of do that, and then it's not part of the poem, so you don't get caught up in the voice of that, because it's sort of a scientific explanation of something that's more setting up the poem than it is a part of the poem. It feels a little off, and so and then we get into sort of a jargony type, more science-based language here. This just doesn't have the energy and the speed of the other version. The Halcyon Alcedo, I guess that's how you say it, however, contravenes this cosmic principle by stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer. See, it's it doesn't have that. You're already in this different type of language, and it really is. There's a really interesting way. I was just thinking about this with the some of the poet response submissions, but there's a way we sort of get locked in. The first few lines of a poem sort of give out the way that the poem's going to sound musically, and then we're sort of sometimes that's a wrong step. And then we start sounding the wrong way. And then we have to sort of refine the voice of the poem later. And I think that's what happened here. And that's why the second version's stronger. Anyway, so by stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer of light 3 times as long as its oblong body, a sapphire strobe that scintillates. So it's really, it doesn't have the same energy. It's got this scientific sort of distance to it in the beginning. And the other version, though, jumps right in, which is perfect because, of course, it's a photo of a kingfisher diving right into the water, too. So that's perfect. But Lapis dives in divine rapture. It's a great start. Sublime light, a divining rod. I mean, the difference is so stark between the entry points in these two poems. So, Yeah. Okay, let's look at a little bit more line by line. I especially love this part too. So free, captured, and flagrante, forever freeze-framed, a feather of no mass or gravity, a flying wave of pure energy, as memorial of moment, as momentum of its as monument of its momentum, of planes. Don't. The fact that I tripped over that is just me. It's not because I'm thinking while also reading out loud instead of just reading. As monument of its momentum on planes of photosensitive cells, as bioluminescent specter, that every light beam lancing the lens. I love that, every light beam lancing the lens. That alliteration is just right. It's just enough where it's sort of satisfying. One more L would be too much, I think. Will be transluminated, claims that no object can remain untransformed by the gaze. A meteor trailing its tail of cobalt flame. I love that too, trailing its tail of cobalt flame. There's just great descriptions and language here. Yeah. Quantum mechanics is a swordfish's rippling blade that swooshes through the air of sage green leaves. A sword-beat kingfisher suddenly scintillating to sear its flaring silhouette onto screens. I think this might be too much. We were talking about like that. There's sort of a too much alliteration that can happen sometimes, which I was mentioning with the light beams lancing. That's kind of all you want, the lens. But here it gets a little bit too much, I think, with the sage green leaves, a sword-beat kingfisher suddenly scintillating to sear. The scintillating feels forced in the same way like a forced rhyme would be. Given the suddenly and the sear around it. And we have this kingfisher and the sword and the sage. It's just too much in the silhouette. So I would pull back. I think there's too much language going on. The poet is exposing themselves there and making you remember that you're reading a poem. And what we want to do, the poem is this magic space we're creating where we forget what we're doing. The idea, a great poem, we forget. Well, we forget like where we are, like the actual room that we're in when we're lost in something, that suspension of disbelief type thing that just the whole rest of the world drops away and an hour goes by and you've sort of living in the book. That's the feeling we want to create really quickly in a poem. And having the poet show up with too many flourishes diminishes that sense of being lost in the poem because you notice the poet there being a poet. Let's see. So Sharon French is trailing its tail of cobalt flame would be a good title, and it would, but then you lose if you have like a great line as the title too, then it loses the power of the line some. You sacrifice the strength of that line. I like the idea. I think probably Katie has been talking about it. So she says a simple title would be fun juxtaposition to the high level vocab of the poem, and I think so too. So Katie likes a fish jumps into water. I think maybe getting some of the let's read more of the poem. I think what I would do with a title is see if we can get some of the relativity theory things out of the poem. I want to know how to finish this poem in the reversal too, and I wonder if we could find a way to make this the title and end a kind of something that works as a better ending. But anyway, let's see how it ends right now. Rippling blade that swooshes through the air as sage green leaves, a sword-beaked kingfisher suddenly scintillating to sear its flaring silhouette into screens of light extended 3 times along its body, a sapphire strobe stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer. The halcyon Alcedo, however, contravenes this cosmic principle, that at the speed of light everything shrinks to wafer thin. That theory of relativity states that speed compresses thickness. I think maybe I would let's see. I would think about something like the theory of relativity or speed compresses. One of these lines down here. I would think about making that the title and letting the poem end here and maybe keeping at the speed of light everything shrinks wafer thin. So here's what I would do, I think, with this poem. And I'm just going to, for more room on the page, I'm just going to delete this one. And now what I would do, I like the streamer here. I like this line here. So I would kind of do like this. And then I would end the poem there. And call the poem... Well, we lost. So what was it? The theory of relativity, maybe. Dick Westheimer says uncertainty in the theory of everything. Einstein goes fishing, says Katie Dozier. Yeah, I think those are all good suggestions. Let's see. Yeah, one of those titles. I don't know. We'll do the Einstein goes fishing. Why not? It is a nice contrast between the science nature of this and that. Does that do enough? Let's see. Let's just read the end. Einstein goes fishing, and then Lapisse dies in Divine Rapture. We love this beginning. We don't need to read it again. But then, and we're going to cut back to this a little bit, but then its flaring silhouette onto screens of light extended 3 times along its body, a sapphire strobe stretching its brilliant blue plumage into a vertical streamer that at the speed of light, or I guess I wish we would just keep that a period. And maybe make this a full sentence, maybe? At the speed of light, everything shrinks to wafer thin. Something like that. That's the direction I would go. So I'm not sure if that's quite the ending we want, but something like that, like something that doesn't, because that the problem was that last, if we pull it back, oops, where'd it go? Yeah, so this section has that whole sciencey jargon, which was a bad start to the poem, and it doesn't have the same energy as the rest. It really feels off to have that included there. So so to find a way to get this concept in without saying it in that complicated way, I think is the mission of this poem. Okay, let's move on to some more poems. And once again, if you'd like to share a poem for critique right now, it is open mic at rattle.com. I'll put that in the thing. I don't have my right slide for that, but you can see there, open mic at rattle.com. Okay, so let's see what else we have to look at. But thanks for sharing that, Lucy. It's always a pleasure. Dick Westheimer was the second person when we got a bunch now, so we're not like desperate for these or anything, which is good to know. So Dick sent this in. Where does it go? Hang on a second. This is a different computer, so things go different places, like when we download stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at this poem. And we'll put it in this document to make it easier on me. Okay, so this is Dick Westheimer's poem. We have, let's see. 1 second. I want to, fix this just so it looks a little better. Yeah, I'm just fixing the spacing and putting it in a better document. Okay. That's what I was looking for. There we go. Okay. So this is Dick Westheimer's poem. And I'm actually really glad that you sent this, Dick, because I was just considering this for the Critique of the Week, and I like it a lot. So this was Dick's Critique of the Week poem, which just came up. I was just reading it, and I was thinking the haiku could just use a good amount of work, and then or a little amount of work, and that would fix the poem up. But this to introduce it, so I went and looked at the article too for this. This is the lake is the story of the Americas. I'll put this on screen. The lake is the story of the Americas, and it's about this lake. Is it listed here? I don't see here. It's a lake in Venezuela that's just terribly polluted. And there's an article about it, about all the industrial waste and the oil waste and stuff that ends up washing on shore. Really horrific pictures of the shore just covered in oil. And one thing that Dick pointed out, especially one photo of a pig sort of stained green from the algae that's stuck to it. And there are a whole bunch of just terrible pictures of what could be a beautiful place. And so the lake is the story of the Americas. And Dick in the note was talking about, our I don't know what you call it, gunboat diplomacy or whatever, the way that we, historically have taken over this hemisphere to the detriment of a lot of the countries down in Central and South America. And anyway, this is, the lake is the story of the Americas. The lake, named for a Taino boy who tried to resist the conquistadors, is dead. Alive now are the islands of human feces floating in cyanophoto seas, crude oil chugging from the broken supply chains, abandoned fishing nets slung over abandoned fishing boats, snags of sludge and 2-liter bottles so coated in slime they look like great rafts of matted black rats. The fish that are left list like wounded gulls, their gills beating for air. The rest are dead. Local boys' bodies are pocked with welts that never heal. The girls, too. The men and women are all worn through. Their line-hung clothes and the pigs that wallow in this mire that once was a lake are all tinged chloroplastic green. The President's for Life has a plan. He will make all these problems go away. The people cough up blood. And the haiku, a diary open to an empty page, Gus Russell, Late Autumn Leaves. So that is the haiku, or the haiga. And of course, if you're new to haiga, there's a great book, which we've talked about a bunch of times, a writer's guide to, or not haiga, haiban, I should say. But there's a writer's guide to haiban that just came out. And they talk about it in an interesting way that I had, but they put it really clearly. Lou Watts calls it sparks, in which is the feeling of that sudden cut between things that sort of stimulate your limbic system while reading a poem. And that's what a haiku has. That's what it's a kurigi, this cut here between two worlds in the sort of the parallel yet different nature of each side of that cut. It winds up being stimulating in like a metaphorical way. It's sort of like the heart of a metaphor. But then what they talk about is how the reading of a haiban works, and you have these different things that spark, they call it, which is that energy that's generated from juxtaposition. And so what you have is you read the title, then you have a kind of spark of energy here because there's what how does this title apply, and there's something a little different in the text than the title. So that's a sort of a juxtaposition there. Then you get to reading it, and then you jump to a haiku, and there's the spark here between the prose and the haiku, and then there's also the spark within the haiku itself. So you get this sort of, and then you go back and read the title, and there's another one when you see the title and kind of combine it all together into one unit. And so you have this like sort of stew of these multiple things going on at once. And that's really where the energy, I guess we're talking about energy a lot today, but that's where the energy of a haiku comes from. The emotional sort of undercurrent of it comes from those sparks that happen in the juxtaposition between the different things. So it's a really nice example of that, and good to share this one, Dick. Now for the haiku, when I read haiban as a editor, just reading for submissions, I always read the haiku first, because the haiku is the most important part. If the haiku doesn't work, it doesn't really matter what else goes on. And the haiku, I think, is too wordy. There's too much here to it. So it's a diary open to an empty page. Great image right there. But then gusts rustle late summer leaves. There's like too much happening almost. And so really easy edit here is just to cut the gust rattle and just have late summer leaves and let the rattling is implied, because late summer leaves are so dry and so light that they're always kind of rattling around. You don't need that gust rattling it, I think. Yeah, and so I think that just cutting that out makes the poem a lot better. One thing I think you could also think of a different word, maybe journal instead of diary. But I'm not sure. I could go for diary myself too. But diary has sort of a younger connotation, more childlike, and journal is a word that feels a little more adult. So I'd wonder about that too. But maybe not. Maybe the more childlike version of that concept is better here, because we do talk about children in the poem. But I would yeah, and as Paul Mitchell Bernstein says too, late summer leaves has double meaning too. Exactly right. So and almost really, I'm always this thing, gust rattle late summer leaves, is almost like a monoku on its own. Like if we do that, like ignore this. Gus Russell late summer leaves is like a nice monoku, because like Paul says here, there's a double meaning on leaves, and so you get that smushed together nature of a monoku. But the problem, haiku is really only two things, and when it becomes three things, it becomes one too much, and it doesn't have the same energy. It loses energy by having too much, and so you end up having really like three haiku in this haiku at the end. And so what I would do is leave it there, and then it just has that word play in the image, and that's it. And it lets everything else go. I think it's a great haiku at the end if you just cut that and shorten it out. So I think that really helps this haiga. Then for the for the prose, I felt like it was a little too long. And I mean, that's just the case. A lot of things tend to be. And it pulled up and started having a little more energy, to say that again. Sort of more by the, a little bit later in. So let's see where I would cut some of this out and then just, and then I think it'd be good to go. I think it was one of those ones that it's some simple editing that make the poem work a lot better. So the lake, named for a Tiana boy who tried to resist the conquistadors. Maybe even, what if we did, I'm doing the same thing over and over again today, both two, but what if we take this and make this the title instead of just saying the lake? So you got to get my face off here. But so what if we, did that as the title, and we'll just, we'll bold this and make it a little bigger. But what if that is a long title? The lake, named for Tiana boy who tried to resist the conquistadors, is the story of the Americas, is the title. And then we get rid of that here. We can jump in because that's the best part of the very beginning. And then I think I guess the problem with the prose part, it was that it started to feel repetitive really quickly. You know, I mean, there's this sort of gross, disgusting imagery of how terrible the lake is, and we get sort of too much of that. And so we don't need this line anymore. And I think the islands of human feces floating in the same sea is a little too much too. So maybe starting with a crude oil chugging from broken supply lines, abandoned fishing nets slung over the fishing boats. I would probably, instead of a list, I'd probably first personize and make them sentences. So I would say crude oil chugs. Oops, not shugs. Chugs from broken supply lines, and let it be a little slower too. Abandoned fishing nets. Maybe thrown over abandoned fishing boats. I guess slung over abandoned fishing boats, and let them be periods, and let the poem be a little more imagistic, like just resting in those images. Snags of sludge in 2-liter bottles so coated in slime they look like rafts of matted black rats. I think there's just too much description. I would probably cut this too. Because I think the problem, I guess, is you end up sort of melodramatizing, if that's a word. Like you tend to sort of go overboard and say too much when you really just have to get a little bit of that description in. So crude oil chugs from broken supply lines, abandoned fishing nets are slung over abandoned fishing boats. The fish that are left list like wounded gulls, their gills bleeding for air. The rest are dead. I don't think the rest are dead either, because we already said the ones that are left. Local boys' bodies are pocked with welts that never heal. And always, too, there's that whole, who said, is Stalin, who said, 1 million dead is a statistic and one is a tragedy. If you can do one boy here, like a boy's body is pocked with welts that never heal, like that. A boy's body is pocked with welts that never heal. His sisters too. Just something to think about. You don't have to actually do this, but that makes it a little more. You can focus in on the one person and have more of a tie to it. The men and women are all worn through, their line-hung clothes, and the pigs that wallow in this mire that once was a lake are all tinged chloroplastic green. The president for life has a plan. He'll make all these problems go away. The people cough up blood, and then a diary open to an empty page. Late summer leaves. Which I love that juxtaposition there, that spark between the two the two poems works really well. You might want to cut a little more. I'm trying to go quickly though, so we can get time for more. But Scott says, "Don't cut the rats, please." Yeah, I mean, you could leave the rats and cut other stuff. I think this is a better length, though, is really the key takeaway. Because it wasn't that any of the lines were not good. It was that there was just too much of it. It was sort of beating the same, kicking the same dead horse over and over again or something, And so, once you get, I mean, every line should have a purpose, right, in a poem. And once you've sort of gotten your point across that we're like living in this world of muck and runoff and slime and sludge and bacterial infested waters. Once we're there and you paint that scene, we don't need more of it. We need to move on, I guess. And so it was just a little too much in this poem. If you want to keep the matted black rats in that line, that's great. And then maybe shrink it even more and cut different things. But yeah, the point is to cut back some of that so it just doesn't go over the top. Okay. Let's take a look at so Scott really likes the lines that were cut, and I was cutting the stronger lines on purpose because we want because it was the problem was for going too over the top, and we have to cut more, I think, if we left those lines. But it's up to you. It's something to play with. But yeah, great Hyben, as Cindy Putnam Guntherman says. So yeah, it's excellent. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to another poem or question. We got a bunch now at this point. It took a while for them to start coming in, but now they are. So let's see. Let's see what we've got next. Jenny Middleton is here, and she says, here's a brevity poem I wrote a few months ago. What do you think? Does the narrative need to be expanded? So we'll take a look at this poem, Interior Spaces. We'll put it in our little document here so we can... I need this window to be a little bigger. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get everything so it fits. There we go. That's much easier. And this doesn't need to be so big. Okay. So this is Interior Spaces, and we will, by Jenny Middleton. So let's take a look at this one. Interior Spaces. It's a steady voice that breaks a glass, not a wavering scream climbing away from the throat, but a sound held in the song of a growl. Like the month before Carrie started therapy, and the champagne saucers, slender flutes, and tulip-blown dessert goblets that she'd been buying for months, although she hardly ever drank, began to teeter on her shelves on the window sills of her upper masonette, their empty, glimmering bodies flashing light even on the dullest days as she left for work an hour and a half late. Her coiffed hair flopping in the gray air's drizzle as she queued for the bus and heard its bluster slowing and its doors hissing open, stopping before her. It's a great image at the ending. I really like that. Interior Spaces, good title too. I like the. There's a lot of, it's because it's personally Interior Spaces too. So there's a play on words there, and it's a metaphor kind of that gets you deeper into the poem. So I think it's a really great title. Interior Spaces. It's a steady voice that breaks a glass, not a wavering scream climbing away from the throat, but a sound held in the song of a growl. A sound held in the song of a growl. That's really interesting. Like the month before Carrie started therapy, and the champagne saucers, slender flutes, and tulip-brown dessert goblets that she'd been buying for months, although she hardly ever drank, began to teeter on her shelves and the window sills of her upper masonette. I'm not sure what upper masonette is. Of her upper masonette. I mean, I assume that's some kind of cabinet, but that's not a word I'm familiar with. Upper masonette, their empty, glimmering bodies flashing light, even on the dullest days as she left for work. And I feel like it's kind of clunky in this middle section. I like the concept, but it's not told as clearly. As Audrey Friedman points out, I think champagne. I think it's misspelled, right? Because it's and I'm not sure why it would be capitalized. So is there a I think that's how you spell champagne, right? Champagne. And I'm not sure why it's capitalized. But, yeah, so Scott says maybe too much alliteration. Sauces, slender. It just feels like we got... this is a theme for these the poems this week, but it feels like we, got the message already and have too much... spend too much time in this section. I like what it was doing, like the concept of it. But it goes on too long and has it's sort of a clunky way of revealing itself. The although she hardly ever drank type thing. That aside is such a sort of a, it's a big aside that takes you out of the poem a lot. Hang on. Sorry, I had a sneeze. So it's a steady voice that breaks the glass, not a wavering scream climbing. I would say just from the throat. We don't need the away. Climbing from the throat. I'm not sure why that's a dash. It's a steady voice that breaks the glass, not a wavering scream climbing from the throat. If you have a dash, do try to do the M dash. It just makes the poem look a lot nicer. I'm not sure you need the dash there. It's a steady voice that breaks the glass, not a wavering scream climbing from the throat. But I wonder if maybe you don't need the but and the dash, or maybe you need a... I don't know. I mean, something. It could be a little cleaner there as it moves through syntax. But I guess the dash sort of leaps you off into this next section. Like the month before Carrie started therapy, and the champagne saucers, slender flutes, and tulip brown dessert goblets. See, that she'd been buying for months. Yeah. So in case to get rid of the but and keep the dash. Yeah. Oh yeah, and two. Scott says not a glass. Yeah, that's better too. It's a steady voice that breaks glass, not a wavering scream climbing from the throat, a sound held in the song of a growl. I like that. I really like the start. It's really great. You don't expect to go somewhere this different after that section, and then it really works to do so. So like the month before. So we're having this, I mean, the whole thing is almost a haiku-like cut right there with that dash, because we go from this one topic into a completely different one, which is, but related in the way that a haiku, two sides of a haiku are. Like the month before Carrie started therapy, and the champagne saucers, slender flutes, and tulip brown. See, this is the thing. It's the slender flutes and tulip blown dessert goblets. That's just too much. I would just maybe cut this section. What are let's see. I think somebody was saying. Yeah, but I don't know. I would cut that. And I would probably cut the drink. The hardly ever drank is something that like adds to the character, but is not really necessary, I don't think. Let's see. Yeah, and so Peter Desmond says, I'm not sure what a champagne saucer would be. I'm not sure either. Let's see. Scott says, go back to here, a sound held in the song of a growl. He suggests just the song of a growl and cutting the sound too. I kind of like that. I think the sound held there, and there's a way you hold the note too. So I think that section works. Like the month before Carrie started therapy, and the champagne saucers. Maybe keep the, yeah. And this, maybe slender flutes and dessert goblets. I don't know. There's like too much here, with the champagne saucers, slender flutes, and tulip brown dessert goblets. that she'd been buying for months. I definitely want to cut this aside. But we really only need like slender flutes and blown goblets or something like that in this section. It's too much. That she'd been buying for months is a detail that sort of is necessary. Audrey Freeman says leave out the saucers and keep the flutes. And that's what I would lean towards. I would get the and the blown, but not the tulip. Like that, maybe? Something like that. Just to cut that down a little bit, because it's just too much detail, which is, a lot of times we're asking for more detail, but in this one and Dick's, that it's a little too much, I think. You got to find the right sweet spot. And we should get that image. What we just need is that image of the flutes and goblets up on the high shelf. Anyway, she'd been buying for months, began to teeter on her shelves and the window sills of her upper maisonette. So someone said a mason. Who said that there? Someone said a mason is a type of house, and so a masonette would be a small house. I wonder if that's. I want to look up that word actually. So Jadman says a champagne saucer is a style of glass used for champagne. One thing you could do is maybe the champagne saucer's slender flutes, and then just leave out the goblets. It's just too much. There's too much. So Jenny says, I included the different styles of glasses to show emptiness and obsession. Yeah, I think if you're listing them, it could work to have a bunch of different ones. But it has to be a quick list, But then she began to teeter on her shelves and the window sills of her upper maisonette. They're empty. I think you need some kind of punctuation here, like a comma or something. Their empty, glimmering bodies flashing light even on the dullest days as she left for work an hour and a half late. We got to get to the end of this poem, too. I mean, I got to be quicker with these. The lightning round's supposed to be lightning. What am I doing? It's just so fun to dig into poems, though. But you get the idea, though. Just if you want to list, goblets and flutes and different things, that's good, but just get through it quickly. Began to teeter on her shelves and the window sills of her upper maisonette, their empty, glimmering bodies, flashing light even the dullest days. I love that, flashing light even the dullest days as she left for work an hour and a half late. Her coiffed hair flopping in the gray air's drizzle. Again, great lines there. As she queued for the bus and heard its bluster slowing. The bus and the bluster, really nice sounds there. And its doors hissing open, stopping before her. And that it doesn't really tell anything. It makes us make the leap, the connection between all these things, the emptiness of buying those things, but also the joy that it gives her, I think, is I get an actual sense of that, where it's flashing light and even the dullest days. It's something to fill up the space with something more. And then the other interior spaces, entering the bus, leaving this house and then entering the bus, and then the way those all work together, I think works really nicely. It's one of those. It's a great example of letting the image sell the poem and letting the meaning come out of just the images that you reveal in the way that you do. So I think it's really great. And then too, the metaphor here of that sort of quiet desperation of the interior space being that wavering scream, not a scream from the throat, but a sound held in the song of a growl, which I like is another great line too. So a really good poem. It's just strip it down, so you only focus on those images. I think is the main thrust of the commentary here. Let's see. Scott says its doors hissed open. New sentence. He says, yeah. And I think we do get into. I don't want to dive into the poem too much. I'm trying to get through everything, but we do have a sense of because the punctuation is inconsistent. That you sort of want punctuation in certain places. We have mostly no punctuated except for these dashes occasionally, but there's some places I trip over it because of that, and so sort of tighten that up too. Dick Westheimer says it's a really evocative poem, and it really is. I like it a lot. Katie Dorsey says, neat poem, Jenny. Particularly great job with the title. So cool to think about all the connections to make from it. It really is. It's like in a haiku way, lay out the scene, lay out the scene, and lay out the scene. It's got three things. It's got the glass breaking with the singing. Then it's got these sort of empty, unused, which that line about even though she doesn't drink is important, but it was flat. but get that image out there. Just focus on the images. There's the idea of glass breaking. There's the glasses up there on the shelf, and then there's the doors of the bus, hissing closed, and the way those interact is just wonderful. And so just let those images do all the work. Okay, we got to move on. I'm terrible at this. I don't know, the lightning round kind of thing. I just blow it all the time because I love talking about poems so much. Okay, but let's do some more. We only got into 3 so far. Jeez. Okay, so this is mashed potatoes. This is this is from Larry Cavaney, who I haven't seen on the chat. Oh, there's Larry. Yeah, me next. Yeah, Larry, you're right. Okay, so this is mashed potatoes by Larry Cavaney, a new voice here on the Critique of the Week. Let's go for it. Mashed potatoes. Our eyes meet from across the table. She smiled, I smiled, her eyes opened in lunacy, my eyes opened in fright. Laughing with food in her mouth, she flung a spoonful of mashed potatoes at me and bellowed and laughing in crazy light. What's that word, crazy? A month later, she delivered me a plate of turkey, trimmings, Thanksgiving. We fucked loud. Next morning, she collected my laundry and returned them clean. In the end, ever saw her again. Interesting. So this is mashed potatoes. A very blunt, short narrative poem. A lot of story behind the scenes, which is a nice way to tell a story. That sort of Hemingway-esque, brevity. Mashed potatoes. Is that a word that I just don't know? Let me look that up. There's a lot of words in this language here. Let's see. Well, they're just talking about democracy, or the crassy is a suffix. But I think, is it crazy delight instead of crazy? I think so. Okay, I think it's just that. That was what I was talking about though earlier. It's like this illuminate for me. A typo like that that I'm not sure what it meant does make it harder to appreciate the poem. A typo that exactly what was supposed to be, it doesn't really have an effect at all. So yeah. Okay. So, mashed potatoes. Our eyes met from across the table. She smiled. I smiled. Her eyes opened. In lunacy, my eyes opened in fright. The line breaks here, I would pull this. It's a little confusing that they're separated. Laughing with food in her mouth. Let's see. I think the from across the table, neat, I would do that. Our eyes met across the table. She smiled. You want to tighten this up. We talk about plating poems sometimes, ironically, for a poem about mashed potatoes. But you want the poem to look like it has some kind of consistency, like there's a reason why it's shaped and feels the way it is. So I would sort of try to, if you can get it into some kind of form where it fits. And most of these works really well with couplets, these short, clipped little couplets. So I would try to do that with a whole poem if you could. So like the in fright we could pull down. You see how much better it feels already with our eyes met across the table. She smiled, I smiled. Her eyes opened in lunacy, my eyes opened in fright. Laughing with food in her mouth. So really good show, like details to paint the scene without saying too much. Laughing with food in her mouth. She flung a spoonful of mashed potatoes at me and bellowed, laughing in crazy delight. And spoonful should be all one word. But I think, because otherwise she threw the spoon too, so that's an important distinction. Whether or not it's would be painful, I think it's the spoonful of mashed potatoes. And I would just say, and bellowed and laughing, because that paints it. And we're keeping this little couplets kind of run going on. A month later, she delivered me a plate of turkey. I'd probably just do that. Turkey shouldn't be capitalized. Turkey trimmings, Thanksgiving. And then maybe you don't need an ellipsis is 3, by the way. But I thought maybe another line to keep that pacing, that little couplets thing going. And then I'd probably skip the next morning. And we have this thing where we're capitalizing sentences even though we're not punctuating otherwise, so keep that up too. She collected my laundry, returned them clean, and in the end ever saw her again. Is somebody never saw her again? And maybe I would not even say "and in the end." So we look at how quickly we change this poem a little bit. I'll read it one more time, and it just tells a story a lot more clearly and cleanly just by cutting some out and then having a little consistency in the shape of the poem. So mashed potatoes. Our eyes met across the table. She smiled. I smiled. Her eyes opened in lunacy. I just say maybe mine in fright, actually. I think that's not enough of a voice going on where you want... It's not enough of a voice going on where you want to have that musical repetition going on within the voice. It's a really clipped, sort of simple language. And so I think in a more natural speech, you just say that. Just say mine in fright. So anyway, our eyes met across the table. She smiled, I smiled. Her eyes opened in lunacy, mine in fright, laughing with food in her mouth. She flung a spoonful of mashed potatoes and bellowed and laughing. Maybe just laughing. A month later, she delivered me a plate of turkey trimmings. Thanksgiving, we fucked loud. She collected my laundry, returned them clean, never saw her again. And there's this, really, really great little simple narrative storytelling in a poem there. And you can clean it up like that and help it out a lot. Okay. Yeah, as Scott said, kind of Bukowski-esque. Yeah, I agree. Paul says couplets for the couple. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is it spoon? I see. I think it should be spoon. And there's one Allen spoonful, right? I turned off my thing so there would be no autocorrect. But yeah, to fix that too. Okay. Let's move on to another poem. We're up in the hour, but I think we might be able to, we'll get a couple more in. Here we go with another poem. So let's see. Again, that was Larry Cavaney. Now let's go to Peter Desmond. Another short one here. Thanks for the short ones. That really helps with the lightning round aspect too, because I'm just terrible. I really got to move on, but it's so hard to move on. Okay, so here's Peter Desmond's poem. Restaurant is named for a poet. Restaurant is named for a poet, and again, that is Peter Desmond. Here we go. Restaurant is named for a poet. Interesting title. First, one of the things you do there, I talk about this sometimes, but there's a way that fiction works in which just have a cliffhanger ending at the end of each chapter makes people want to keep reading. You raise some kind of question. It doesn't have to be like a literal cliffhanger, but some kind of thing that's like, oh, if I read the next chapter, I'm going to find out the answer to this question. It's such a simple, tiny thing, but reading all the children's type and young adult novels to my kids, I noticed that they all do that. And there's just this way that, if you don't do that, you're at a disadvantage to all the people who do, because, if you have some kind of way to entice you to read the next chapter is more likely to be read. They're going to finish the book and they're going to write a review and recommend it to your friends. And if you don't have that kind of thing to draw you back to the book when you're done for the night and turn off the light or whatever, the book's not going to be as successful. But anyway, there's something like that going on in a really simple way here, where the restaurant is named for a poet. When they see that title, I want to know who the poet is, And so even if I'm like flipping through the book, I'm going to read this poem just to see who the dang poet is. So it's a nice sort of trick to make your poem get a little more life just by having a title like that. It's a really simple thing, but it just works. Sometimes the simple thing works. So restaurant is named for a poet. And a poster in the window reads, "Woman, Life, Freedom." So I walk right in with a poetry book to read over lunch. City of Stories by Denise Provost. Her last name rhymes with de novo, so there you go. So Provo. Well, thanks for that hint in the poem. The place is called Maulana, Farsi for our master, a term that honors Iran's greatest writer of verse. The interior is subtly roomy. The lights are low, but not gloomy. Over a vegetarian platter and a cup of Persian tea, I devour Denise's delights. It is a wild surprise to find she wrote 2 poems on Rumi. I'd marry her, so sue me. And that's Peter H. Desmond. And so what's going on here? I mean, of course, we have once you heard, this the two hints, and with the suitably Rumi, you knew that it was going to be Rumi was the poet, which is kind of fun. Yeah, and so, and let's see. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so I think there's Okay. So the restaurant is named for a poet, and a poster in the window reads "Women, Life, Freedom." So I walk right in with a poetry book to read over lunch. I don't know if we need to know this. I think it's too much detail. It doesn't really matter, unless there's a reason it matters that I don't know. City of Stories by Denise Provost. But I'm not sure what that adds. So I think I would cut it. But I could just be, there's some connection between this poet and Rumi that makes sense. I'm not sure. But for now, I would leave it like that. The place is called Maulana Farsi for our master, a term that honors Iran's greatest writer of verse. The interior is suitably Rumi. The lights are low but not gloomy. So what I was going to say, and I got sidetracked, is that when you have rhymes like this that are sort of nursery rhymes, sing-songy type rhymes, where they're really strong and really sort of prominent, I think that can work, but it has to work in a certain kind of poem. And that has to be consistent, and it has to be sort of lighter to work, to pull it off in a functional way. And so with this poem, I think I would focus on not revealing who the poet is, and and only do the rhymes, and so sort of let it be almost like a riddle poem, and that's how I would change this. But I do like the title, and I think you can get through, like, the restaurant is named for a poet. You can get by just by saying things like the interior is suitably roomy, the lights are low but not gloomy. Like, keep that kind of sing-songy type rhyme going, like it's like a rhyme, and then we have to figure it out who it is. I think that's the best way to go with a poem like this. So yeah. Let's see if there's any other comments. I'm trying to move quicker now. Let's see. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We'll try to get to, I think if I'm quick, I can get to everybody who sent something in as of right now. Okay, so here we go with this. Let's go to the next one. And next up is Paul Bernstein, who we had here, a song for Dear Henry. Another short one, which is nice for the lightning round. It keeps me on task. Here is a song for Henry. Let me get a little bigger. A song for Dear Henry. Here we go. Oop. A song for Dear Henry. Old Henry. Oops, sorry. There we go. A song for Dear Henry. Old Henry sang songs for sitting high and happy in a sycamore tree. He hailed the dead of empty beds, the power of the sea. That's so funny. This is like very similar to what I was suggesting with the other poem. But I'm no Henry, dear Henry, and pine for no sycamore unshattered or high, where I, as a child, not never sang happy till my father died. Dear Henry, there's a hole in your chicken heart, a bucket of father's slugs and shells that in spite of minds depart, I do not share. Dear Henry, though I flew a bit like you, I had no happy sycamore. Where? Did I get the whole poem? It ends in a strange way. Let me double check. I'm just trying not to reveal people's email addresses too. Yeah, interesting. So it is. Oh, it dropped out the. I'm sorry. It dropped out the stanza breaks, which I'll add back really quickly. But it is a sonnet form, and let me go back. Okay, so it did. Sorry for. Oh no, it didn't drop out the stanza breaks. Okay, so anyway, so it's a sonnet form, of course, a song for Dear Henry, and yet the rhymes are not based on where they would be in a English sonnet. So, a song for Dear Henry. I really like the beginning. What I felt like is that the music sort of got a little lost toward the end, And what I would focus on is just sort of making it more consistent. But I like it. I think it's a fun poem. Old Henry sings songs, sang songs for sitting high and happy. This is another example of like going right up to the edge of like too much music. I mean, because we're having it be sing-songy right away, we're like showed that it's allowed by the content too. But it's just enough where it like starts to get slightly annoying and then pulls back, which is like the perfect level of doing that. So it's a really nice start. Old Henry sang songs for sitting high and happy in a sycamore tree, and with the alliteration too. Like all that music is like just like on the level of like I'm willing to endure so much music, and that's the perfect end to then pull back. He hailed the dead of empty beds, the power of the sea. And I think there should be some punctuation there at the end. When you have punctuation internally in the sentences, and then you don't punctuate at the end, it ends up being confusing and difficult to read. Like it's hard to establish that as a pattern that you're used to as a reader, and so it takes a while to like recognize that, and you end up tripping over stuff. So I would end. I put periods at the end of these, but I'm no Henry, dear Henry, and pine for no sycamore unshattered or high, where I was a child, not never sang happy, till my father died. The Till My Father Died, so I think the music was good till My Father Died feels a little off. It didn't fit to me. And then, so I would find a different line. That it feels off to me. It's a matter of keeping that voice consistent. That's the only thing that's like sort of holding this poem down a little bit. And that's a place where it feels off to me. Dear Henry, there's a hole in your chicken heart. I love that chicken heart. A bucket of father's slugs and shells that in spite of minds depart. I do not share, and then the I do not share feels a little off, even though it's to get the rhyme there with the where, but the where feels off. Yeah. And Sidney Putnam Monk points this out. Yeah, there's a hole in the bucket, dear Henry, that song. Yeah. All right. So let's see. The shells that in spite of minds depart, I do not share. Again, because the lack of punctuation and the sort of sudden shift in there, it's a little throws me off. Dear Henry, though I flew a bit like you, I had no happy sycamore. The where, why not there? At least it would make more sense and keeps the rhyme too. But there's a way that these three lines just feel off to me, and that's what I would work on. Just making the music fit with the rest of the poem, so it feels natural, even though it's really deep in that sing-songy rhyme. But I like it otherwise. I like that. It's the kind of poem that we don't get to see very often. Let me see if there are any other comments really quickly. Let's see. Yeah, so Scott says, great first stanza. I love the music of this one, really well done. This says Dick Westheimer. Where's Annabelle Lee? Maybe a cameo, says Scott. Yeah, so it's just a matter of tightening up those and making them, because they're just it's really nicely the way that they're so heavily rhymed but buried with internal rhyme rather than just end stops. In a few places there are end stops, but it's mostly not. I think the music of that's really good within a sing-songy type poem like that. I like the sonnet form too. It's a fun play on that. I think it's just a fun little poem. It just has these three lines that feel off to me. And that's a little better with it there in the end, not really a problem anymore. But then this one, that inversion of in spite of minds depart, I do not share. Like, that's not how we talk. You have to get it has to be sing-songy in a way that we could actually say it. There's all these unhidden or unspoken, unobserved rules of English language grammar that just twists and inverts itself around to get that line in. And it needs to follow the way that we actually speak a little more clearly, so we can feel the music and not feel like it's sort of wedged in there. And that line has the problem. And then the Till My Father Died feels also out of place too. So just clean up those couple lines. I think the poem works pretty well. Okay, let's do, I think we have one more. Is that we had one more? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we have one more. This is Jack McKee. This is a little bit of a longer one. Well, it's shorter than the... It's not a long poem, but it's longer than the ones that we've done. Let me just take a minute for me to open it and get it over into the right screen. This is Neverland. Oop. Okay, this is Neverland by Jack Mackey. And okay. Neverland by Jack Mackey. Here we go. And let me it's a little big. Let me shrink it down some. Okay, Neverland. And the poet there, Jack Mackey. Okay, Neverland. It is the anniversary, and we have hightailed it away from the reminders to someplace safe by the sea. After his sisters go to bed, I unspool the thread I grabbed at the market. I wrestle the wounded umbrella, rescued from the trash can at the edge of the beach. I carefully sew the canopy material back to the twisted ribs, needling new life into what's left, reattaching its thin green nylon. The room is dark. I am alone with a twinkling light in a coil of yellow, thinking of the girl sewing the shadow back on the boy who refused to grow up, his darkened outline never to die, hooked as he was on flying forever. Tomorrow we'll huddle under his mended shade, our shattered family, our feet sticking out into the warm sand. I lie awake in this rickety rented beach house, listening for the boy to fly through a window, beguile us again, help us, heal, and help us. Stitch his shadow to our sunburned souls. So I really like the Neverland is it's a good title. It points without really letting you know exactly it's going to be about that. So Neverland. It is the anniversary and we have hightailed it. So just in general, what I'm going to say is that I feel like the end was very summarizing and didn't trust us to understand what you were trying to say. And so I think the ending is probably just right here. And I'll fit the poem a little better on this screen so we can kind of make that a fake ending. Okay, but so I think I would just end it there. But let's take a look at it a little more closely. Neverland is the anniversary, and we have hightailed it away from the reminders to someplace safe by the sea. I think the someplace safe by the sea has a nice music to it. The at the anniversary of what, we're not really sure yet, but it's sort of intriguing a little bit. And then we hightailed it away. It sort of sets up the voice too. So it's a nice opening sentence. After his sisters go to bed, I unspool the thread. Again, we get that bed thread rhyme. So there's some internal little rhymes here. There's a little music playing up in the poem. I unspool the thread I grabbed at the market and wrestled the wounded umbrella, rescued. And then that repetition of the or the wrestled and the rescue, that sound. I grabbed it at the market and wrestled the wounded umbrella, rescued from the trash can at the edge of the beach. So again, nice description there. And again, I think all the poems have done this, which is strange. But a lot of poems have, but you need the period at the end so we don't think that the sentence continues. I carefully sewed the canopy material back to the twisted ribs, needling new life. That needling new life is a great turn of phrase. Into what's left, reattaching its thin green nylon. And I mean, you just, without the period, you end up confused because it's regular punctuation elsewhere. Like we have a period up here at the C. So I expect periods. When I don't, I trip over it, and it makes the reading more difficult. And there's really no need. If you want to write poems without punctuation, like, go ahead. But it has to be consistent, or else the reader gets confused. Anyway, the room is dark. I am alone with a twinkling light of coil and a coil of yellow, thinking of the girl sewing the shadow back on the boy who refused to grow up. See, we have the enjambment here across the stanza. Because of this period, we now know how to read this, Otherwise, we're thinking that it might end, and then we see how it doesn't. It just makes it much harder to read, not including those periods at the end. They're important. Anyway, thinking of the girl sewing the shadow back on the boy who refused to grow up, her darkened outline never to die, hooked, again, that hooked play on words, hooked as he was on flying forever. And I think the poem there, if we end there, conveys, even though it doesn't go into detail about what we're talking about, it conveys the whole thing, that's then revealed in the end. Tomorrow we'll huddle under his mended shade, our shattered family. But we get the sense of that because it's the anniversary. We don't, because we get to hear it's a shattered family, we still don't know why this family's shattered, but it's an anniversary we're hightailing it from. We already have that information, right? So we don't need that. Our family's sticking onto the warm sand. We already know we're at the beach. We hightailed it. Safe by the Sea. So we already know that too. So it's summarizing what we already know. I lie awake in this rickety rented beach house, listening for the boy to fly through the window, beguile us again, help us heal, and help us stitch his shadow under our sunburned souls. We know the souls are sunburned. We know we need to heal. We know this umbrella was an act of mending. We know it has the metaphor for Neverland and the Peter Pan story, the allusion to that. And so none of this adds anything that we don't already know. It's just summarizing and restating the stuff we've already learned, and it's not trusting us to get that point from the poem. And so if we cut this is the real ending. It's just right here. And I think the poem works ending at that spot. And so it's one of those very common things to do. A lot of times we sort of spin our wheels at the beginning of a poem. A lot of times we feel like we weren't clear enough. We want to make sure that the reader gets it, so we explain the whole thing at the end. And so you get either this sort of summarizing, sort of dull lead up to a poem, or you get this summarizing end that's unnecessary and pulls out all the energy from it. Those are the two most common, edits to a poem we have, looking at submissions or anything like that. I rarely edit poems very much, but sometimes we will publish a poem in this exactly like this pattern, where it was like the poem is great, but it ended like right there, and then you explained it. So cut off those last two stanzas, and it's good. That happens a lot. So yeah, good poem there. Good storytelling. Thanks for sharing all these, everybody. It's past the hour that we planned, but we got to everybody. I think everybody who, as of 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. or whatever time it is for you, submitted poems. We got to everybody. So thanks so much for joining us and participating. It's a lot of fun. I love the critique of the week. And that is going to wrap up the lightning round. So make sure let me check my spam just one more time. Okay. Yeah, we're good to go. Okay. So that is the critique of the week, and hope you enjoyed it. We're going to do that the regular time. It's not a permanent shift. I was just on a plane. There wasn't quite enough time to make sure I think I could have, but it would have been really close. So I decided to postpone it to one day. But normally it's Fridays. So it's Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Normally, if you'd like to participate and this is your first time aboard, we do this every Friday. It's a lot of fun. Usually, if you'd like to submit poems, you go through the submittable link, rattle.com/critique, then find submittable link there, and you send 2 poems, and I pull people out from that submission queue if you'd like to have your poems critiqued. Now, this week's guest in the Rattlecast coming up is going to be Jane Clark. And Jane is I think she might be my favorite poet, or her favorite poem in the Irish Poets issue. And it's just a wonderful poem about loss through a farm metaphor, great, beautiful images and feeling in it, even though it's understated. A really wonderful poem that Jane had there. And her newest book, A Change in the Air, which is a finalist and still in the running, I think, for the Ford Prize for Best Book of Poetry in Ireland this year. So I think they haven't, if I understand right, they announced the finalist but not the winner yet. So she's still crossing her fingers that she wins one of the biggest prizes for poetry in Europe. And that's A Change in the Air. She's going to be the guest at a special time. So we're shifting times around a lot. This time it's because Jane is in Ireland, of course, and the regular time would be like 2 a.m. or something in Ireland. So we're moving it up for her to the noon Eastern time slot. That is Rattlecast number 207, Monday, August 21st, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And again, this is just temporary move just so we can get Jane in at a time she's awake. But that's going to be Rattlecast 207. Hope you join us and hope you share your prompt poems. The prompt for this week, which I already wrote mine. It's one of the first times I've written it not an hour before the show. I wrote it on the plane flying in when I wasn't doing the critique of the week. And the prompt for this week was to write a villanelle that includes a cryptid. And a cryptid is a mythological creature that may or may not exist, probably doesn't, but some people believe it does. The cryptozoology is the study of those creatures, which is always fun. So write a villanelle, which is that form with the refrain moving through the poem. It's sort of a 17 lines, 3-line stanzas, etc. Look up a villanelle, and then I write a villanelle with a cryptid in it. That is your prompt for this week, and then submit it to the prompt poems category if you'd like, or share it on the show. Either one or both is appreciated. Anyway, we'll see you then on Monday. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.